Formula One, the sport where you never know what's right around the corner, whether it be Sebastian Buemi's wheels deciding they don't want to exist anymore, Alex Albon nicking his teammate's car, or Max Verstappen stealing Daniel Kvyat's career and his missus. Now, the other part that we have to get into who's going to be driving those cars in 2025. Some of them might be a given, some of them there might be an unexpected move or two. That's what this video is all about. I'm going to be giving my early predictions into who's going to be on those cars in 2025. I'm going to skip out the obvious ones like Ferrari and McLaren because let's be real, we already know who that is because of the confirmed lineup. Let's get straight into it and let's get started off with Red Bull. Alright, so let's start off with Red Bull. So let's obviously get the clear one out the way. Max Verstappen has a contract and will remain at Red Bull unless somehow any of the rumours with Mercedes become true, but from what I've seen of them late, that's been pretty much shut down. Sergio Perez, he's been off to, obviously he was off to an alright start, he came second in the first two races, didn't get on the podium at Australia. Do I think Red Bull are going to retain Perez? I don't. I do see Perez heading to another team, which I will put when I get to that team later on. But there's a few names that have been mentioned around the Red Bull seat. You've got Fernando Alonso's been briefly mentioned. Daniel Ricciardo, as everyone was thinking, was the favourite at the start of the season to get it. Carlos Sainz as well. After obviously the performance in Australia there, he's definitely going to be on the key books for them. And that is actually my decision. I believe Carlos Sainz is going to race for Red Bull next year. Being a member of the Red Bull Academy or the Red Bull Junior Academy, racing for Toro Rosso before going on loan to Renault, and then obviously made the move to McLaren. I feel like with his progress, Red Bull could be willing to offer him a seat back in, and arguably after just having his appendix taken out or having appendicitis and now coming back and winning his first race back from that, I feel like he is probably the favourite candidate for that at the moment, and that Ferrari could potentially be regretting letting him go to sign Hamilton. Ferrari is obviously being cleared, so let's move on to the next of a bigger team and let's move on to that Mercedes seat. Right, let's move on to Mercedes now. So George Russell has a contract for next year, that's set in stone, he's not going to be leaving anyways. Again, there's a few simple names to start off with. Kimi Antonelli, Pierre Gasly was mentioned, but the choice I'm going to go for is Fernando Alonso. I feel like Antonelli's a bit too early to make the jump straight up to F1, as much as he is highly rated and everything else. I feel like when Mercedes looking to possibly get to the new regulations in 2026, they might look for someone with that experience who could help them develop along and into 2026. I believe that's perfectly where Alonso would come in. But it depends sort of if he does want to keep on racing, along with if Aston Martin want to try and retain him, does he want to stay or does he want to move on? If that outcome does come and there is an option with Mercedes and then possibly having the project push forward, I believe Alonso would be open to joining them, and you never know, it could be a really good partnership. Although after today's accident, possibly not have a happy George Russell. And let's move on to the next team. Again, obviously McLaren's been out. I'm trying to do this in sort of order, so let's move on to the next team, and let's move on to Aston Martin next and see where that goes. Okay, so now on to Aston Martin. Both seats are in question at the moment. There has been a bit of speculation over whether or not Stroll will continue after this year. I personally believe Stroll will keep the seat as long as his dad's in charge or he decides to move on to a greater adventure. If he has an interest in keeping on racing, then I believe he's going to stay with them. And then if Alonso does decide to leave and go to Mercedes or one of the other teams that he's rumoured with, I feel like Lawrence is going to want a more experienced and like a bigger name driver in there as such. I mean, Nico Hülkenberg could have been a good shout for us helping them out previously when some of the drivers went down with COVID and else. Did a race with Aston Martin at the start of 2021 as well, I believe. But the driver that I'm going for is Sergio Perez. Was formerly with the team, Won a Grand Prix with them just before they got converted over to Aston Martin. It's the big name that Lawrence might want, a good experienced driver. He is getting a little older, but he's not as old to the likes of like Fernando Alonso as such, so he would still have a good few years up at the top, or you never know how long he could end up going on for. So that's my personal pick for Aston Martin, will be Sergio Perez and Lance Stroll. Let's move on to the next team, and let's move on to the Red Bull Visa Cash App, whatever it is.
What the fuck? I'll save it. It's a helmet. So go on.
And next up, let's get moving on to the Cash App. I'm just going to call it to keep it nice and simple because I can't remember the full name off the top of my head, if I'm being honest. So, current driver lineup, Yuki Tsunoda and Daniel Ricciardo. Ricciardo came back in to replace Nick De Vries at the end of last season, or like halfway through the end of last season. Liam Lawson also did a few races for them when Ricciardo, I think it was broke his wrist at the Dutch Grand Prix. I can't remember exactly what the injury was. So do I believe this driver lineup staying the same? No, I believe straight away I'll say Liam Lawson. I feel like he's guaranteed a seat for next year. Was sort of looking likely that he might be a favourable one over to race even over Ricciardo this year, but they obviously decided to stick with Yuki and Daniel. As for the second seat, I believe it is just going to be a 50-50 between Yuki and Daniel. I feel like if Red Bull got their full say, they would stick with Daniel, but A, Yuki's been performing better this season and at a higher level, and B, Honda also like having it's already a known fact that they prefer having a Japanese driver in, as obviously good marketing and stuff as well. So that leaves me for my choice going to be Liam Lawson and Yuki Tsunoda. Next team we're going to move on to is going to be Haas. Okay, moving on to Haas. They've just had a good finish at the Aussie GP. Nice double points finish for them. Hulkenberg, Pippin, Magnussen. So do I believe that both these drivers are going to stay at Haas? I do not. I believe Hulkenberg is going to move on to a different team, and it's going to be one of the last two teams that I haven't mentioned yet. As for Kevin Magnussen, at the end of last season, it was looking a bit ropey whether as to not he was maybe going to be worthwhile keeping for beyond this season. I do personally feel like for the promise that he showed at the start, that he is going to retain his seat, because I believe he's also going to be partnered alongside Oliver Bearman. I believe Ferrari kind of have a somewhat say in that Haas seat. I believe after his performances with Ferrari, stepping in for Sainz, he's going to be a sort of, not nailed on one, but I believe he'd be a high favourite if Hulkenberg does move on to greater challenges, which has been linked quite a lot. And when they went for the two rookie drivers, it didn't go very well for them. So I feel like they might keep Magnussen for the experience, allow Bearman to sort of develop up, and then see where that takes them. So we've got two teams left. We've got the Stake F1 team and Williams. We're going to move on to Stake next. Moving on to Stake now. So Stake's current driver lineup is Zhou Guanyu and Valtteri Bottas, as he loves to say in that certain way. Do I believe that this lineup's going to stay the same? I don't. I believe Bottas is going to stay, and I believe that Zhou is going to be replaced, and I believe he's going to be replaced by Nico Hulkenberg. Hulkenberg was a favourite for the team last year. They did try signing him this year, along with them converting over to Audi in 2026 in the new regulations. I feel like they might want a German driver, B, someone who's going to be consistent and be able to deliver them points given a car that is going to be capable of that, and someone with his experience and knowledge could be able to head and help them push forward into the right direction, and hopefully they might develop into one of the bigger teams come 2026 and onwards. So this just leaves Williams now, so let's move on to the last team of Williams. Moving on to Williams now for the last one. Current driver lineup of Alex Albon and Logan Sargent. Probably going to be a little bit of tension in the team at the moment, considering that Alex has just nicked Logan's chassis and his car, and he had to sit out of the Grand Prix. That alone for me says the fact that James came out and said that he trusted Alex a lot more, and if they're willing to give him his car, doesn't really speak a lot of confidence for me in Logan at the moment. So I do believe Logan is going to be replaced at the end of the year. Who it's going to be by, Antonelli could have been a good shout considering Mercedes get that sort of say in the seat. But the one I've gone for is Mick Schumacher. Again, with Mercedes sort of having this say, Mick is the reserve driver at the moment for Mercedes, and I believe he deserves another shot in it. I believe the state of Haas at that point was just a shambles, to be honest. Having Mazepin as a teammate and then going for sort of, not losing faith, but, you know, choosing to be vocal enough about his opinions probably didn't really help him. I believe he will get another shot in F1, and I believe Williams could be the perfect team to do that. They are sort of seen as the developmental team, obviously, of F1 with George Russell, but that could, if you get the results out of it like you had with Russell, then it could very much prove to be the right move. And then if you have a driver lineup of Alex Albon, who's already contracted till 2025, and Mick Schumacher, who could only go up from here possibly, that could be a promising one for the future. So my confirmed lineup for Williams is going to be Alex Albon and Mick Schumacher. And in typical fashion of me being an idiot, I completely forgot that Alpine exists. So no, Williams was not the last team. Alpine's current lineup, you've got Gasly and Ocon. This is just another really simple one. I think that Alpine will retain both drivers. I haven't really seen anyone else linked to them as such. I know Gasly has a contract for next year anyways. Ocon's is due to expire this year, but I believe it will be renewed anyways. And that is going to come to the end of my predictions video for what the F1 grid's going to look like in 2025. Let me know what you think down below if you agree with me. If you disagree, again, this is just my opinion. I know that there's been a couple of other opinions around, so I may clash with some others, but this is my honest opinion of what I think the grid's going to be for 2025. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll be sure to react to this when the full grid gets confirmed for 2025 and see how many we got right and how many we got wrong. Apart from that, take care.